We are recording this session. Now, today is going to be even a short session. This is number one. Number two, I will again try to clarify what you need to do for your term paper. I will post the announcement for term papers for the project at the end of this week. Today is Thursday. By Saturday, Sunday, you get the announcement on what you need to, how you need to submit the paper for those who still have limited understanding on how to do the project. A lot of students ask the question, and very often students misunderstand and they submit a paper that is not adequate. I'm going to try to clarify today. And then the other thing I will do is I will also basically discuss or talk about the discussion forum and clarify the concepts that you need to discuss in the discussion forum. If you have submitted it, you can always go and revise. I will extend the deadline to tomorrow just in case you need to revise what you said, what you submitted. That is where I'm going to begin. So this week, we are going to be talking about the economics of the drug trade, okay, and how it has been tackled in different by different people. And so, and again, to apply the ideological, analytical perspectives to the efforts to fight the war on drugs, okay? So the first thing, and I'm going to just take concepts one by one. I'm going to take the concepts and try to explain what they mean. Now, there are two ways that people try to fight the war on drugs. One is the supply side approach, and the other is the demand side approach, okay? The supply side approach tries to address the war on drugs by limiting the supply. And of course, if there's no supply, the users of drugs will have limited access. This is number one. And if you limit the supply, if you limit how much the supply, the price will go up high enough to discourage some users. As you know, in economic analysis, what has happened, what happens is that if there's a reduction in supply, if the supply curve shifts to the left, the equilibrium price will increase and equilibrium quantity demanded will decrease, and equilibrium quantity supplied and demanded will decrease because of an increase in price as a result of a shift to the left of the supply curve. And so there's a supply side approach, and the supply side approach that is taken can come in different forms depending on the analytical perspective. And this is what I'm going to try to clarify to students. When you ask questions, they just go on the internet and try to talk generally about policies and what the US government needs to do. And I'm asking, apply the concepts that we talk about here, okay? And then the demand side approach is an attempt to limit demand or to curtail demand. And as you know, if the demand curve shifts downwards, equilibrium quantity supplied and demanded will also be decreased, even though the price has decreased, but also equilibrium quantity decreases. Mean the equilibrium price decreases, and equilibrium quantity will also decrease if the demand curve shifts downwards to the left. And so now the question becomes, how do you implement the supply side approach and the demand side approach? If you read one of the articles that as assigned for this week in module, I believe 11, you will see that the government allocated a lot of money to try to address the supply side. Okay. And so the supply side is the side that produces the illegitimate drugs, but also distributes. That's all part of the supply chain. And so what are the different aspects of this supply side? Now, you can take a rational approach as opposed to the realistic approach, the deviance perspective. Now, the deviance perspective will take it that those who grow illicit drugs and those who prepare them and those who process them and those who distribute them are deviants from society, those who don't care how they make money. And so they can supply these drugs, they can produce them, they go out of their way to produce them because it's an easy way of making money, and therefore should be stopped as much, with any method possible. And so the deviance theorists will then take it, for example, the United States government would go to South America or go to any other part of the world where opium and cocaine come from, and they do a number of things. One is they destroy crops. They use military coups to change governments, and they assassinate people. When I say destroy crops, they go in militarily and spray chemicals on the farms in South America, or they will change governments and destroy the crops on land one way or another. So that is the deviance perspective, because those who produce these drugs must be people who are bad, who are deviants, who simply can use nefarious methods to make money. Okay, so they also try to arrest the drug dealers, like people like Escobar and Chapo, or whoever are the ringleaders, the importers. They try to arrest them, try to assassinate them. If they enter the United States, try to kill them, put them in jail, or what have you, because they are considered to be deviants, they're considered to be bad people. And maybe they are bad people because, after all, this is a way of making money, and so they will kill, they will murder, they will circumvent the law, and what have you. Maybe. Now, but the distributors like Chapo and what's the other guy's name that I mentioned? Escobar, Pablo Escobar. They are not the only people on the supply side. The supply side would also include the farmers who grow these crops in their various countries. They are also part of the supply side. And the question becomes then, how do you also discourage these farmers from supporting the big-time dealers? Remember, these farmers are just the small, potatoes, and they are the little people in the supply chain. Well, the farmers also want to make money, and so the supply side tries to deal with them, and the way to deal with them would be to spray their crops, okay, and destroy them on land. That is one way to deal with them. Okay, so But the rational approach, the rational theorists, the liberal theorists, will say that those who supply drugs have, they are rational in the sense that if this is the way to make money, if this is the way to make more money, then they are not doing it because they are deviants. They are not engaged in the production and distribution of drugs. They are not engaged in the farming, in cultivating these drugs because they want to be deviants. It's just a way to make a living. What if there are no alternatives? What do you want them to do? And so both the United States governments and the United Nations organization through the World Health Organization have tried to provide financial aid, foreign aid, so that the farmers will be able to cultivate alternative crops. Now, the question then becomes whether these alternative crops yield as much money as the illicit drugs. And so from a rational point of view, these farmers are behaving in a way that enables them to make a living. But then you have also issues such as, finding adequate markets for alternative crops, that they produce. For example, a country that exports bananas, you encourage them to produce more bananas for export, or to produce them more profitably, or to produce other crops in their own countries where that they can rely on. Okay, and the question then is, do they have sufficient markets in those places to be able to rely on alternative crops? So you the rational approach will be to provide alternative means of income for the small farmers that produce these crops. Okay, so now there is also then the other side of fighting the war on drugs, which is the demand side. Okay, because if there's no demand, then supply will not be profitable. And so the demand side, the deviance theorists will simply then say that those who demand drugs and those who use them are deviants, and so should really be punished. And so you have law enforcement arresting people, putting them in jail for possession, for use of drugs. But so that's how the deviance theorists will look at it, that those who use drugs are bad people. They're deviants in the community. They do not conform to norms, and so they should be arrested. They should be put in jail, and that should be a deterrence. Remember, to put people in jail, to find them, to arrest them, is a way to discourage them. And so we call that a deterrence. You deter them from the using of drugs. Okay. And of course, you know that when people go to jail for a criminal offense or for felony, of course, they find it difficult to find a job or what have you. Now, that is how the deviance theorists will look at it. Now, how about the those who believe in the rational approach? Okay, people use drugs because it's a way of escaping from the demands of life. So, from their frustrations or from their problems. And so they do things that are rational in the sense that it helps them to forget their problems for a minute. So those who believe in the rational theory, how would they implement the demand approach to the war on drugs? Well, of course, education, to point out to people the harm that the drugs will do to them, not only for their ability to, say, work, for problems in their families. And so you try to offer them education. You also try to rehabilitate those who, for example, have problems as a result, those who have health problems. I mean, people use drugs and then they become very sick. And so you offer them, medical treatment. You try to also offer the medical treatment to even just stop using drugs, period. Besides education, that this is wrong, but also if they fall sick as a result, you try to provide medical treatment for them and try to educate them otherwise. And so this is the approach that the rational theorists will follow. Now, how about those who approach this from the point of view of historical materialism? For dialectic materialism, you can call it historical materialism, or you can call it dialectical materialism. Of course, their approach will be based on their explanation of the psychology of drugs, which is that those who use drugs are members of the working class who are alienated from the system of production and distribution. And therefore, if you simply overthrow the capitalist class and bring an end to the alienation of the working class, then the use of drugs would also be decreased, in which case it will eradicate the problem, at the source, which is to overthrow the exploiting capitalist class. Okay. So those are three perspectives. All right. Now, the other question that I would like to address then is the organization of the drug distribution that we see. You can see that drug distribution and production is really based on you might say semi-monopoly kinds of markets. In the neighborhoods, of course, you see drug gangs who fight over market and territory. But on a larger scale, on a global scale, you have the cartels that control drug distribution, and there are several of them. You have the Medellin cartel, you have the Sinaloa cartel, you also have several cartels in Mexico going by different names, and I'm going to challenge you in an exam to at least identify several of them. And these cartels are, in a sense, what is a cartel? And I would like the cartel in business is a group of sellers who organize and combine and restrict prices and restrict production. And so they restrict supply and they restrict, they also control prices. And the whole idea is that coming together as a cartel to limit production and to also control prices is a means of maximizing their profit, pretty much the way in monopoly theory in economics, the monopolists maximize their profits by controlling production. So now the question then becomes, how do these cartels, how did the concept of cartel go, how can you use the concept of cartels to explain cartels in drug markets? Of course, it's very simple. You know that drug cartels, the big ones, the Medellin cartel, whatever other cartel, the Sinaloa cartel, there are again several in Mexico that and other parts of South America that control the distribution and the production, the processing of drugs. And the question is, these cartels, do they function, the cartels in illegitimate markets, in illegitimate drug markets, do they function like cartels in legitimate markets? The answer is yes, because they have their territories. They divide up the market into territories and try to control prices and control output. The question is that, or the problem, as in legitimate business cartels, that is cartels in non-illicit businesses. For example, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries is a cartel. Okay, because the petroleum exporting countries, the main countries that produce the bulk of the world's crude oil, they form a cartel in the sense that they get together and agree on who produces how much oil. So they give quotas of production to different countries and say you cannot produce more than this, you cannot produce more than that, and also they fix prices. That is how cartels function. Way back in the past, there was also a copper minerals cartel. That is, the countries around the world that dominated the production of copper also had a cartel. And there are, there are still cartels out there of world commodities. So these are what we call cartels in legitimate businesses because they control things. And you can even say, the automobile companies around the world. There are very few automobile companies around the world. Until recently, for example, when South Korea began to export vehicles, only European countries and few European countries actually, produce automobiles. The United States, France, England, who else? Germany, with their Mercedes, and of course, a few other, car companies around the world. They could form a cartel. And of course, they did not try to form a cartel because they are from the Western world, and so they discouraged monopolies. But in a way, they were, of course, they're monopolies. How many automobile companies do you have in America? Ford, and who else? GM, okay, and Chrysler. Okay. But before that, there were several others. They all went under. Now, the difficulty with cartels is that members of cartels sometimes try to cheat because cartels, cartels have, there's tremendous difficulty in controlling cartels because members of cartels try to cheat, okay? Cartels operate like what we call in economics, what we call oligopolies. That is, there are very few sellers in the market, and the few sellers in the market can get together and collude and agree to fix quantities and prices. So the same thing happens in the illegitimate drug market. They get together and fix prices, and they respect each other. And I remember they're violent, and they use violence to impose, to impose their rules. But still, it doesn't work. They still try to cheat. Okay, people still try to cheat. This is why you have the gang wars or the drug wars among members of drug and illegitimate drugs production and distribution cartels. So they function in essentially the same way. And that question is posed in the discussion. How, what is the similarity between them? Are there any differences? And of course, the big difference is the use of violence. But the similarities are: one, there's a gang up; two, members try to cheat. Okay, and this is why then you see violence as a means of implementing the rules. But cartels in the illicit drug industry have been a little bit more enduring, than cartels in legitimate businesses, except for maybe the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, which is still a functional cartel. But believe you me, attempts to cheat exist in the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries called OPEC, OPEC, OPEC. There are also problems of cheating, or even cheating in different ways. Believe me, cheating in different ways. Okay, all right. So now, having gone through that, the other questions that you might need have to address in international, in the international illicit drug industry, is the question of trying to legitimize the use of certain drugs, for example, marijuana, to legalize them. Okay, even in some countries in Europe, they also try to remove the legislation or to we say relax some of the control measures and try to be supportive of those who use drugs. Now, when we think about legitimizing, the problem with trying to restrict the use of drugs is the price elasticity of these illegitimate drugs is very low. So whether you try to restrict the supply and prices go up, it does not really significantly reduce or at least does not proportionately reduce the quantity demanded. The same way, if you remove the restrictions, what happens is that if you legalize the use of these drugs like cocaine and opium and even marijuana, there's going to be an increase in the supply because the expenses of trying to circumvent the law or even trying to enforce markets, will no longer be there. And so the average price of drugs will decline, and the supply curve for illegitimate drugs will shift to the right, and so what would happen is when the supply curve shifts to the right, the equilibrium quantity will increase, for one, but also the equilibrium price will decrease. Once the equilibrium price decreases, many more people will use drugs. And so what is the spillover effect? What is the consequence of that for the community? What is going to happen, I suspect, will be that more people will use drugs. Now, the fact that you have the equilibrium price decreases is not going to in any way diminish the biological effect on the body. So more people will now be able to have access to the drugs, and more people, and those who are already using it in spite of the high price will probably end up using more. And so there's going to be a strain on the medical facilities and medical costs for society, but it might also affect people's ability to function, because when somebody is under the influence of drugs, what happens? They may not be able to go to work because they are stoned. They may become more violent in their families, and so you have a strain on the families. Productivity will definitely decline. Social problems might increase. Okay, and people will now also, since they are spending a lot of money on their drugs, they will not have resources, and so crime, other kinds of crime may increase. So it's what I would call a difficult situation to manage. It might become a no-win situation, and so this is why probably the war on drugs has continued in spite of the limitations, in spite of limited success in it. Okay, so I need for you to bear some of those concepts in mind when you are reading the literature and when you are answering questions. Please do your best to read the literature, because your examination is going to challenge you to cite some specifics from the readings. This is where a lot of students drop in this class, because they do not read the readings, and so when I ask specific questions based on some readings, then they just go on the internet and try to get an answer, which is going to be very difficult to provide the kinds of specific answers. Okay, so the other question, the next thing.
I have a question about that.
Okay, somebody has a question?
Yes.
Oscar.
So when you say that, are we going to get a study guide for the exam? Because there's a lot of reading. Okay. Are we going to get an outline for something? Because
I will. Okay. So since you are requesting it, what I suggest you do, send me an email, so that I could, refer you to the chapters of the textbook you should read for the final, and also to the articles that you need to read. from where I'm going to draw the questions. Send me that email before the end of this week so that I'll give you time. Remember, that is still next week and the week after, so we still have more like 2 weeks to go. The last day of this class is the July 13, and so next week we're going to be in the week of July 5th, and so the following week, to July 13, which let me see. All right, so we have the week of July 3, July 4th holiday, and the week of July 13, which is the entire week, from Monday through Thursday. And next week is the week of July 3 to 7. And so we really have 2 more weeks in this. So, remind me before the end of this week so that I can really cite the specific documents that you need to read, because I'm going to go into them and ask you to be able to answer questions. But you have a valid point, which is, to limit, what you need to really SWOT, okay? But for now, I'm going to just let you know that I'm going to be specific with regard to where I'm going to ask you to cite, so that you get the best out of this class if you go through those readings. All right. And thank you very much for that proposition. Any other questions before I do the final announcement? All right.
Yeah, one more question. There was a discussion posted, I think, for the 3rd. Did you take it down? Because some of us answered it already.
I said I will extend the deadline to tomorrow for the discussion. In that way, if you really want to.
No. It was another one posted after that. It was one that was for July 3rd, and a lot of people already answered it. Like, I already answered the one that was due to 29th and the 3rd, but now the one that's on the 3rd is gone. It's no longer posted.
The one that is due tonight, I'm going to extend to tomorrow or even Saturday. The one that is due on the 3rd, if you want to revise your submission, send me an email and I'll go and open it up for you. You get that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Just send me an email to remind me, okay? All right, the final thing I would like to talk about is the term paper, okay? Very often students totally misunderstand what they need to do, okay? Identify a topic, okay, and read 7 articles on that topic, 7 articles, but it must be a narrow topic. It must be a very narrow topic. Don't just say the war on drugs and you read 7 broad articles on the war on drugs and say you have done it. That's not the right thing to do, okay? And I was looking today at one example I will give you. So we were just talking about the cartels, okay? So you can say, you can take an article, or you can take a topic like comparing the Medellin cartel and the Sinaloa cartel. That's a narrow topic, okay? And you can look at how they began and how they ended, if they have ended, okay? And how they operate. And so at the end of the day, what you be able to accomplish is to describe, compare the way they recruit, or compare the way that they operate and why one is surviving and the other is not surviving, or why the other one ended and the other one did not end. Or if they're still both active, similarities in their methods and where they operate from, maybe the environment in which they operate, is the same, because the Medellin is Colombia and Sinaloa is, I believe, is Mexican or some other Latin American country. Okay, or if both of them are from Colombia, what enables them to operate? Okay, what is the environment that enables them to operate, or how they operate in the United States? What is the difference in the way they operate? Okay, you can take say corruption in the US market, say among law enforcement officials, do you find any kind of corruption in US government officials that enables these international cartels to function? Okay, and so you can compare the way El Chapo was captured and the way Escobar was captured, because both of them have, been apprehended by U.S. law enforcement. If you know a story about them, you can talk about their lives and times and the way they operate and how both of them ended up in U.S. custody. And that would be a good integrative summary to do. Okay, read 7 articles and summarize each article in one page. Okay, so that gives you 7 pages right there. Okay, and you must cite the article before you summarize it. And then at the end, you must then list all the 7 articles on a separate page. And when you have done all of that, you should then begin with an integrative summary that ties all the articles together on a common theme. For example, the life and capture of Escobar. You compare it to the life and capture of El Chapo. Okay, and what happened? How did it happen? You summarize that in two pages or maybe 3 pages, but typically 2 pages will do, so that you can link them, you can compare them, and come up with a thesis or a theme. And so altogether, you're looking at 2 pages, you're looking at 7 pages, that's 9 pages, and one last page, which is a 10 page. And I'm going to check for it. Okay, I always check to make sure that you have 7. All right. Okay. So having said that, does anybody have any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I thank you all for showing up, and have a nice evening. Now, in all likelihood, Thursday next week, there'll be no office hour because I will be traveling. Okay, I'll be in the middle of a trip. So what I might do is have the office hour on Tuesday evening, no later than Tuesday evening. But if you get an announcement, then show up. If you don't get an announcement, don't show up. And then, of course, the following week is the final week, so you're not going to be able. There will be no office hour. So today might be the last. You heard what I said? Okay. All right. Have a nice evening.